Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. Today we're going to talk about what type of equipment I'd recommend you own for your BMW. So this is my 2021 G80 M3 Competition, and forgive the thumbnail and title, but this is geared more toward cars like this, E90s, 10-year-old BMWs that are great value and great performance for the money. So if you're new to my channel, this is my 2021 M3 Competition. It's currently in break-in mode. I'm thoroughly enjoying it. But I'll admit one thing, it's a relatively new concept for me to purchase a new car. I'm used to purchasing older cars, getting a better bang for your buck and servicing them myself. So that's what this video is about today. So in my opinion, you don't need a ton of money to own a BMW, and really your best value is going to be purchasing a used one provided you can work on it and you don't mind tinkering yourself. Forgive the mess of parts here, but I guess you could say I'm an extreme DIYer and I'll tackle any task, even if it involves tearing apart an engine or replacing an engine at home, getting into computer coding and custom electronics. But I think the average person can work on these cars no problem. So just for some background on me, I've always had an inherent interest in electronics and computers. I was building custom computers as young as I can remember. I'll take on any project really because I figure I can learn along the way. So just a quick example there, I built that at home as a way to run Audi ignition coils on my BMW and to convert the signal for when to fire. Early on in my channel, I made a video about how to custom code these angel eyes to run a higher brightness by playing with the hex code for the lighting module and custom coding. All information you can find on the internet, but it was interesting at the time. I adapted this car to have active cruise control so that I could have it automatically adjust distance to the car in front of me. Even though this is a 2008, that feature was possible and we retrofitted it. I converted my car to manual at home. I replaced my engine at home. I changed the turbochargers at home. So I would say that 99% of the time I can take care of any electronics issue at home. I don't really need to go to the dealer for anything. So with these cars, you can pretty much do anything you want at home, in my opinion, if you're willing to invest in the appropriate equipment and tools. This car has active steering, and there's no way to calibrate it without using some type of BMW specific software, but even still you can find that, download it, and get the job done. So that's the topic of this video. How do you maintain these cars as they get older, as they depreciate? What tools will you need at home to be able to service these cars without constantly running back to the auto parts store trying to get another part? Let me cover that now. If you're really tech oriented and you're always looking for a project to work on and something interesting to do on your car, then these cars can be quite rewarding even though they're older. So for me, I kind of scratch that itch, and that's why I'd keep a car like this around, because I can constantly tinker with it and get more out of it. I also realize that these cars are getting quite old now and they're not as popular, so I'm going to also cover the F series and what you should have. So for the E series cars about 10 years and older, I'd recommend this cable. So I've managed to get all my projects done just with a regular laptop that I've dedicated toward working on this car with. I download the software from Beamer Geeks, INPA's, BMW's standard tool set, and I can pretty much do everything I need to. You can read all the modules and everything on the car, just like that. Read for error codes, display it on all the modules, and do all the vital things you'd ever want to do on your car. That would include custom coding through NCS Expert, etc. So now that may even seem antiquated at this point to use an old laptop with a cable. Most people don't even own one anymore. They just have their phone. So now you can do it through a Bluetooth via a device like this, through MHD to get vehicle specific error codes, or you can even get Pro Tool for coding and diagnostics, etc. There's a few ways to do it. You don't necessarily need a laptop unless you really want to do some intense custom coding, which most of you guys won't want to do if you're just trying to keep these cars on the road. Now on an F series or G series car, so basically anything about 2011 and newer, you would be using a cable like this called an E-net cable. It's called an E-net cable because one end of it is network based. So consider this just a general overview of the software that's going to be required to work on these cars, depending on what type of problem you're facing. For the most part, you don't need a laptop and to get this involved, but it's just good to know that you can do it at home if you need to. So this is one of the pieces of software that you'd be using for coding on a newer BMW, ESYS. Then there's ISTA Plus for diagnostics on F Series and G Series cars. Okay, so now that we got the electronics out of the way and I explained to you that it's a good idea to have a laptop to do your own diagnostics, it's not absolutely required. There's many ways to go about getting that information, but you will need a certain set of tools. Now you have to look at it from this perspective. You know you're handy, but you don't necessarily have a lot of tools. You want to buy a BMW, a used one, and in my opinion, it's the only way to buy it is to be able to work on it on your own, especially if it's more than 10 years of age. So if I had to do it again, I'd actually choose tools that were ideally suited. I wouldn't buy one of those complete kits that has everything in there. I'd go for specialty pieces and get them individually. Buy each thing individually and you'll get a really refined set without spending a ton of money. So what I would do is buy a 3/8 ratchet, but make sure it's a swivel head so you can skip the regular straight one. I would get a short 1/2 inch for leverage in tight areas without the swivel. This is not necessarily required, it's optional, but this has really made my life easy to get leverage in tight areas. So the swivel head 1/2 inch is nice to have, but not absolutely required. A must-have would be a thin wall 12-point magnetic 3/8 spark plug socket. You're definitely going to want this. And I'll put a link in the description to some of the more popular choices. Another must is going to be these E-Torques or inverted Torques. These are a specialty type of socket primarily for German cars. That's what the bolt looks like for that type of socket. German cars tend to use this type of bolt instead of using a 12-point for extra surface area. So it's not going to be in perfect order, but these are very handy to have because anytime you pull off a door panel or do anything inside the car, you're probably going to break one of these clips. So I'd keep a set of these on hand just to have in case something goes wrong. Trim clips. Now this will probably seem overkill, but I recommend a 3/8 torque wrench with angle. This has an angle gauge on it. It'll tell you the torque, but it's digital, and it'll also tell you what angle you're going to be at while torquing the bolts. So that's very important on these cars. This is an oil pan bolt. If you look at it, it looks like a standard, pretty heavy looking bolt, but if I put it on this scale, it weighs only 12 grams. This is a steel bolt. It's a little bit thicker, but similar. 60 grams. There's a lot of aluminum bolts on these cars, and it's for a specific reason in my opinion. You can stretch these quite easily, and when you stretch a bolt, you almost make the threads lock into each other harder, so you get a better bite and better torque, but they're one-time use, you can only stretch them once. The benefit is also that they're very light, so overall if you have a bunch of these all over the vehicle, you can save weight, but you wouldn't be able to apply enough torque without breaking the bolt if they were not stretch based. They would just snap before you could get to a reasonable torque. But when you stretch the bolt, you get them to bind into each other in a more secure way to get a strong bite without needing a lot of torque and also without adding a lot of weight to the car. So that's why you need a digital torque wrench angle even when you're starting fresh. Seems overkill, but I would have done it sooner if I knew. Another must is a 1/2 inch torque wrench for tightening your wheels and whatnot. It doesn't necessarily have to be angle based because you're not going to really be doing specialty fine torquing at such a big diameter. Very simple device, but you also need a 1/2 inch breaker bar to get leverage. You don't want to be using a torque wrench to get leverage even though they're quite long because you'll throw off the calibration. So a simple 1/2 inch breaker bar is handy. I'll put this in the optional category, but this is a super long 1/2 inch extension. This was really handy for me when I was doing more specialty stuff like changing the motor mounts to get to the side of the engine and reach all the way down. Made my life easy, and also when I had to get to my transmission bell housing bolts and whatnot, but for just your average DIYer, this is optional. If you're doing aftermarket modifications, putting on aftermarket parts, you may find having a little mini hack is nice to have. This will go in the must-have category, an oil filter wrench to be able to get the oil filter off. So you will need a set of Torx bits that go all the way down to T10, and they typically only go up to T50 or T55. You want to make sure you have all of those. And something that probably won't be included in one of those kits is a T60. You're going to want to buy that with a 1/2 inch drive to be able to use your breaker bar and release your belt tensioner. So look out to buy a T60 individual. So let's put this in the optional category, but this is a small screwdriver that can take really small bits. If you're doing anything in the interior, you may need to go all the way down to like a T7 or whatnot, so it's good to have this. It goes without saying, but a little work light is nice to have. Speaking of working on the interior, you're going to want plastic trim tools to be able to pry off interior trim without marring it up. Now we'll go to the optional. Optional would be something like this. It is a metal trim tool. It helps you remove rivets and whatnot. It's nice to have, but you could also use this end of the plastic trim tool anyway. If you buy one of these kits, it'll come with this. This is come in handy when you need leverage to pry things off, and also another one of these trim tools. Again, those are definitely optional. Plastic trim tools a must. Now, in the get me out of a bind, life-saving tool category, I would recommend these tiny wrenches. They've really helped get into tight areas. I have one set up like this. I used it to tighten my outlets, aftermarket outlets. It was a game changer. Things you never really think about, but this particular tiny little 1/4-inch drive ratcheting hand tool has saved me a ton of grief on a few occasions. I've used this on a number of occasions to get into really tight to reach areas, and it's really been awesome. I'd recommend this as something unconventional, but it'll definitely save you a lot of grief. Again, in the oddball category, an O2 sensor removal tool is nice to have. Optional, but you'll probably come across the need for it one day. A size you wouldn't really think to get is a 24 short impact, but I've used this on a number of occasions. For removing axle bolts, they're 12 point, 36 mil, so you're gonna want a socket as such, 36 mil, and it's actually a 3/4 drive, but I have an adapter for it. If you have an impact gun, these torque sticks are handy. These go to 80 and 100 foot-pounds, but I would say these are optional. If you're ever gonna touch your suspension and you have an impact gun, I'll insert a clip. I recommend this. It's a torque stick at 140. It's about what you'd be tightening your tie rod ends and ball joints to with an impact gun, and it's really hard to hold the knuckle straight without it spinning on you as you're trying to torque it with a conventional torque wrench. So this is a must-have if you're going to touch suspension if you have an impact gun. So let's put this in the luxury category, more than optional, but it's really been awesome and it saved me a ton of time when I'm doing more in-depth work. So I'd recommend one of these 3/8 electric ratchets. Even though this seems like overkill, I'm going to put this in the must-have category, because if you guys are going to own one of these cars long-term, there'll come the time when you need to drop your subframe, and this will save you a ton of grief. So this is a 1/2-inch electric impact. So I'd recommend ratcheting wrenches. It'll save you time. And if you're going to grab any one with the swivel head ratcheting, I would go for a 16 with the swivel head. You'll find yourself grabbing for this quite often. 16 swivel head. If you can get the whole set ratcheting, swivel head, but then you still want a fixed set because it helps with leverage. And I forgot to mention, you only need metric wrenches. Now, pliers wise, it may seem odd, but I've gotten by with just this right here. Set of needle nose, long, side cutters, vice grips. Let's put this into specialty but recommended. You will need a set of snap ring pliers that are reversible, so you can change the direction. This is another type of box end wrench that's optional but recommended because it'll help you get into some tight spaces. And it's good for leverage. It's good to have a set of brushes to clean up surfaces, metal brushes. Forgot to mention, on some cars, this 24 mil is used on the oil filter wrench to be able to get it off. It's actually not an oil filter wrench, you're going right on the housing. It'll be good to have various pry bars of different lengths. Optional, but you'll probably encounter this when you're taking apart wheel well lining and whatnot, is a plastic rivet gun. Surprisingly, this is going to be in the must-have category, but you want a 14 mil Allen on a 3/8 drive to be able to drain your diff fluids. You'll also want a set of hex bits that range from about 4 to 10 mm. I'm sure all of you guys would think to get an extendable magnet in case you drop a bolt. It'll help you with picking up in tight to reach areas. Most people have that, but that doesn't work when you're trying to pick up an aluminum bolt. So I recommend the following. You just basically squeeze here and it'll grab a bolt like that. A set of Allen keys are required, but if you're going to get them, make sure you get one with the ball end on the other end so that you can get to tight to reach areas and also get at an angle. So nothing fancy is required in terms of screwdrivers. You just want one long flathead. This will serve me well. Then your standard screwdriver set, but then make sure you have a stubby flathead and a stubby Phillips in there as well. A must-have is going to be a set of picks of various lengths. You want the short ones with different angles, and you want the long ones with different angles to get at your radiator hose clips, etc. Regular hand drill will be handy for taking out a bunch of low torque stuff. To save how many different types of sockets you buy, I like to buy these step up and step down adapters. So that is a step up. This is a step down. You want one of these thin wall universal joints. 3/8 is pretty much all you need in this type. You may have to wrap some electrical tape around it to hold the shape. When you have room, you'll go for one like this that will hold the shape more easily. And I'd recommend you get a version of that at 1/2 inch as well, but you don't necessarily need this style at 1/2 inch. This really short extension has come in super handy in time. And then you want other 3/8 extensions of various lengths, as many as you can get as well. Weirdly enough, I only have this one 1/4 inch extension that I ever really go for. So you only need one long 6-inch version of a 1/4 inch extension. Forgive the mess, but I made myself a one-man brake bleeder kit in the past, so plastic tubing and a piece to go into your brake caliper. You will definitely need this one day. You can either buy it and get a bigger bottle or make it. These shears have really served me well on many occasions. I can go to them often for any type of cutting. And I don't have it with me right now, but I'll put a clip in. I recommend jack pad adapters for jacking up the car without marring up the plastic jacking points that come from the factory. Another thing I'm missing right now is my compression gauge. I use that to verify engine health. It's on loan right now, but a compression tester is recommended. As for a jack, I'd recommend a 3-ton low profile. I'd recommend some really heavy duty 6-ton jack stands that will get you a lot of height in case you're doing a major job like an oil pan gasket. I also recommend a jack like this, a low profile 1.5-ton jack. What you're probably gonna have to do is stick a jack in from the side to give you enough clearance to go in from the front and jack up the car. You'll also want a couple standard jack stands as well. For hammers, I just use this one here, a mini sledge. That's come in super handy. It's a must-have, and a rubber mallet. This will be in the optional but come in really handy category. It is a 3-jaw puller. I've needed it to change my center support bearing and just for various reasons when I had to reset my clutch and pull off a pulley. I'd get this because you can get them for under 30 bucks. It's a nice thing to have in your toolbox. Kind of obvious, but a funnel for oil changes. It'll get right in there and step itself to hold itself steady. If you look at these are impact 1/2 inch long. I would focus on the following sizes in case you don't want to buy a complete kit. You're going to want 16, 17, 18, 19, and 21. I recommend keeping a set of O-rings at home because they've come in handy on a number of occasions. You're going to need a full set of punches to be able to do various jobs like wheel bearings, to get your axle out, etc. I recommend a creeper like this because if you're ever working underneath the car, you're going to need to be somewhat comfortable. So this will be for the people that are comfortable with electronics, optional, but I have used it on a number of occasions. Solder, digital multimeter, heat shrink tubing, alligator leads for testing. This is a working prototype board that I made for the coils to drive my Audi coils. It's kind of a redundant. I redid it cleaner after I made the video just so I wouldn't have any issues. As for a soldering iron, if you're going to attempt it, make sure you get one with a variable heat range. Of course, you'll need some electrical tape. You'll want a good wire stripper. Chances are you'll need a way to boost your battery or maintain your battery, or if you're ever going to be flash tuning or doing anything with coating, you'll need at the very least something that's capable of starting the car after a 2-minute burst charge. But ideally you should be using either another battery or a battery maintainer that will draw and supply a constant voltage, not something where it could drop down in brick modules. But just for the average guy, I would recommend this. You're going to want lots of short and deep 13s, 3/8 and 1/4 inch drive. Most common deep sockets you're going to need are 8, 10, 11. Bolt sizes that are most common on these cars are 8, 10, 13, 16, and 17. So you're gonna want primarily long. I don't really have an issue. I never really reach for the shorts. I just go for long all the time. So if you're gonna start somewhere, get the deep socket, 3/8 drive between 8, 10, 13, 16, 17, etc. Because if you buy them individually, you may not be able to work on all these other cars, but you can buy better quality versions of what's out there if you just get them one-offs. So besides what I've shown you, anything else doesn't come to mind, and just skimming through my toolbox, it doesn't stand out to me. So I'm just gonna focus this video on giving you the absolute essentials of what you need to be able to own a BMW. That's where the title came from. What do you need to be able to own a BMW? The ability to follow a DIY and not be afraid to work on it yourself and to invest in some of the basic tools. But you shouldn't have to be a flat rate mechanic with a $10,000 toolbox. We can specialize and just try to keep it under $1,000 for all the little bits to give you the ability to work on your own car. But something that does come to mind because I recently used them and they were specialty, I might as well show you, are these. A crank seal removal tool, a crank locking tool, and a bushing press tool. I use it for my differential bushings. Lastly, I have my timing lock tool, which most of you guys won't be using because you wouldn't be going that in depth. Kind of goes without saying, but BMW and any new manufacturer would cater toward buyers of cars like this, new cars that are going to be under warranty and serviceable. And you could almost argue that maybe nowadays they're catering toward Alfa Romeo and Audi drivers with aggressive front ends like that with that controversial grille. But give it a few years and this car is going to be in the hands of DIYers, out of warranty, and really expensive to maintain unless you're willing to rent yourself. And the motivation for my channel has always been to cater toward the people that don't mind picking up a set of tools and learning along the way. What does it take to own a BMW? Not a lot of money, just the courage to work on it yourself if it's a few years old. If this is the first video you're catching of mine, please consider subscribing. I do upload regularly. Thanks for watching.